I've had a Steam account for 8 years, but have split my time on PC with multiple different storefronts and have had considerable time with every major console since I was a kid. This is all to say that I've been playing games for a long time, but I've only ever collected a total of 377 trading cards that can be sold on the Steam marketplace. These generally go for just a couple of cents for each one you want to sell, then you get a fraction of that cost in your wallet as Steam takes a cut. Part of the reason I'd never sold them is that they're worth so little that I'd almost prefer to keep the trading card as a trophy than get rid of it to cover a fraction of the cost of a new game. Through part curiosity and part a rejection of my digital hoarder tendencies, I decided to put every single Steam trading card I could up for sale and get myself something pretty out of whatever landed in my wallet. Here's what happened next. Let's start with establishing the rubric I devised for this project. First, I put up cards to sell for the average price they were selling for when I checked. Generally, as you go to price up a trading card, Steam will tell you what they've recently sold for. With marketplace data indicating the demand around each card, I eventually realized that there were some cards I wouldn't even be able to give away, let alone sell in a reasonable time frame. To get around this sticking point and to avoid the need for my great-great-grandchild to put this video together, I introduced what I call a popcorn rule. Sort of. You know how you can tell your bag of microwave popcorn is done if you can count for 3 seconds without any more kernels popping? Well, I know that some trading cards will literally sit on sale forever, and a decent chunk of the cards I put up for sale had seen no interest recently. I decided if I could go 4 hours without one selling, my proverbial bag of popcorn was ready. That's when I'd spend my earnings and pick a game. Within a day, I'd scored £3.33 from 55 sales total. Now that I'd made my millions, it was time to start shopping around. To aid my search, I'd set my Steam store to only show discounted games and only options under £4. To my surprise, I actually found tons of great games I wouldn't usually have even considered. So many, in fact, that I was genuinely struggling to choose. I was in the middle of writing this very part of the video when I got an email that shifted my course entirely. It was an email from Steam alerting me that a wishlisted game of mine had gone on sale, an indie title called Milk Inside a Bag of Milk Inside a Bag of Milk. Funny, I don't even remember putting this on my wishlist. I had actually looked around quite a bit before finding this deal. I saw a few classic titles that are perennially on sale, games like Rainbow Six Siege, Death and Taxes, College Kings 2 Episode 1, all viable choices I'm sure, but the origin story here just felt too good to me. Whether I liked it or not, my email inbox had picked my game for me, and who was I to say no to Gabe Newell? Within moments that had been added to my basket and I was ready to play. Milk Inside a Bag of Milk Inside a Bag of Milk is one part diary, another part visual novel, and a third part a meta-deconstruction of those first 2 parts. It's deeply self-aware and often talks directly to you as the player, but it doesn't feel like it's doing that to impress you so much as to connect to you. The game is about someone going to the shop, getting milk and bringing it back home. A simple task, but complicated by their struggles with executive dysfunction, anxiety, and dissociation. The game's journey is filled with all the little things that brings our character off track, but these aren't always framed in a pitiful way. The character talks about the death of their dad, presumably due to suicide, refers to some sort of accident, and begs you not to reduce him to a sequence of diagnoses, which is kind of why I skipped trying to arrive at some diagnosis based on her struggles a few moments ago. They've expressed recently moving on to a new medication, and in a way you are sort of a manifestation of that, pushing them gently in the right direction as they become scared of shoppers and ponder on the mechanics of the bag of milk inside a bag in a store, the bag of milk in a bag that is then placed in the bag they bring it home in. Yeah, it's kind of confusing, and that's also the point. There's this antagonistic, begrudging acceptance the protagonist expresses towards their medication and towards you as an extension. It's seen as helping somewhat, but also causes a melody that is uncomfortable to pop up in our character's head. An embodiment of the unreliable narrator, the quote-unquote truth of the matter is left out, and this allows the game to talk about mental illness in a direct yet sympathetic way. Their trouble isn't abstracted through the lens of social media, it's not quantified in a headline, it's a human being and they're struggling. This is a very strange and experimental game. The music is pulsating and atmospheric, but never quite melodic. The same feeling is conjured in the art, which is interesting to look at, but also abrasive and never consistent enough to give you a through line into the identity of the game. Many big titles have these cohesive tones conjured through their art, writing, sound, feel that are intended to wrap you up in a very specific vibe, but, well, Milk, as we'll call it to avoid me saying the whole title again, feels antithetical to that approach. It's almost intentionally alienating as you choose to guide or hinder this person you are directly communicating with. It's kinda great, though definitely closer to an art project than a lot of the games I almost picked over it. You can get both central endings in about half an hour, and I think this is why the game is so cheap. That price point is not directly indicative of quality, and I enjoyed it so much that I wanted something more like it. Around 12 hours after first taking stock and buying this game, my Steam bank account now sat at a healthy £3.26. Luckily for me, this game had a sequel and it too was reduced and in my budget. £1.54 later and I had it downloaded and ready to go. Its sequel is called Milk Outside a Bag of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk. This one has actual animations and production value and it's so much better for it. The soundscape of brooding synth parts cut away into crunchy, distorted guitar, the animation quality feeling smooth enough that when a face looks distorted, it really hits you. It all feels so much more intentional. Once again, we pick up with the same character from the first game, and as the game actually starts, a more familiar pixel art style greets us, though this has more direction and feels more pointed. Our character arrives in their mum's apartment, finds the bag of milk she'd previously placed there, and feels scared. Scared of what their thoughts imply are in adjacent rooms, scared of the fact they've moved a bag of milk from the bright lights and safety of the store to the vast unknown that is their mum's apartment. If you don't like the self-indulgent yet self-aware tone of the dialogue from the first game, you won't like this one, but I do. It all feels very stream of consciousness, and that helps brew this racing atmosphere of everything and nothing happening at once. The way that our mind can trick us into believing our fear right now is so much bigger than it should be or likely is. Milk Outside a Bag of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk is a much more direct horror than the last, infusing elements of body horror almost, but not quite jump scares, and this is thanks to a more defined, less abstract style. Everything is easy to make out, which means it's easier to know when it's all going wrong. Its themes are also broader. There's more room for interpretation of our characters' relationship to their mum, their life, their pills. This time, you start to talk to our main character as she refuses to take whatever pills she's taking. And this subtle change shines a new light on our last game. It makes sense of its esotericism and makes you question your own role. Was your support actually enabling her? And then you get her to take your meds and you're still there. As the player, scrambling to make sense of the options you pick, Milk Outside a Bag of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk did a great job at making me guess my choices. You are a calming presence just trying to help this girl get to bed after the arduous task of getting milk from the shop, yet you're also confused. Milk Outside a Bag of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk feels coherently made, not just in its broader themes, but even in moment-to-moment direction. It does a great job of letting questions you ask linger or waiting just a moment before you start clicking away at that dialogue again. This all lets the game hit at feelings of dissociation, derealization, and impulsive thoughts. The violent ways in which this girl imagines her own death and the collapse of things around her. They feel not quite normal, but certainly to a degree natural. They don't shock into her head and recoil, they are just one of many things she deals with, and this all feels like such an empathetic way to tackle these issues. There's plenty of shock in this story, but it doesn't feel exploitative. It feels grounded, dark, and almost therapeutic. It's also genuinely creative. It starts as an animation, moves to a visual novel, and then warps into a point-and-click game or to a piece of the character we are caring for. This is a clever way of hitting at the fact that people with these problems need support, sometimes in peculiar and esoteric ways. Treatments aren't linear and neither is getting help. There's this scene where, to try and soothe our character, we imagine her cluttered thoughts as fireflies on the ceiling, drifting while we pluck them out and make them into something more coherent. Then they scatter around the room and we are left to pick up the pieces. I love that this story isn't grand. It's not a moment of someone on top of the peak of a mountain throwing their pills off in a grand act of resistance against whatever forces govern their life. Its endings aren't about finding that one piece of the puzzle to solve her issues. They're mostly just about existing and the pain that can sometimes be. It's a game about a girl who is trying hard to get to sleep and the figments she creates to get there. I could talk much longer about this game, the ways that it naturally encourages me to dig deeper into our character's psyche, the way it splits between your decision and hers to create this flowing story where you never quite know when you're in control, the urge to peek into a school bag or bed to ask cloying, pointed questions about why all this happened, the ways it makes me feel bad and why that's actually kind of brilliant. I could go on about how our characters' actions have a certain logic to them. They aren't a person doing random things and getting bad conclusions. Their neuroses are codified in their reasoning, and their reasoning isn't inherently flawed. But I won't, because this is a game I recommend exploring for yourself. For just over £1, milk outside a bag of milk outside a bag of milk thoroughly earns the cash. If you see what's on screen or coming out of my mouth and this doesn't seem like your type of game, it might not be. However, for me, it's one of the most touching, sincere, and brutal games I've played in a while. And this is where I've ended up now. After paying for both games, I've been left with £2.44 left over. Let's get into the stats. From 89 total sales of the 377 trading cards I put up for sale, I bought milk inside a bag of milk inside a bag of milk for 32 pence, and milk outside a bag of milk outside a bag of milk for £1.54. With a leftover fund of £2.44, I made a total of £4.61 from all sales. This means, on average, each Steam trading card made just over 5 pence for me, which would be a bit higher with Steam's fees not included. This average is at least partly propped up by big hitters from games like Elden Ring and Clannad. They'll both make you cry, but for different reasons. So I ask you, the viewer, where should the rest of my fund go? I'd considered making this video with 3 games and buying Death and Taxes for £1.64, but if I'm honest, this would have been mostly chosen because it's in my budget and on the first page of results I'd seen on Steam. So if you have a game, please let me know and maybe I'll give it a try. This feels more fun and personal than something algorithm created, so leave them below and I'll consider adding it to the wishlist. I'd also considered playing Killing Floor 2, which is in that budget and a game I've played for maybe 2 hours total on console. If you're a connoisseur of the cheap, reasonably educated in the really budget, let me know how you would spend your cash. Overall, though I only managed to sell just under a third of my trading cards in almost 3 days, I'm glad I did. I had so many that I never really paid attention to anyway, and now I have experienced a few games that weren't previously on my radar. On the plus side, milk outside a bag of milk outside a bag of milk has trading cards too, so here's to my new collection. Let's just hope the next game is a bit easier to pronounce. If you've stuck around this far, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, all that stuff. It did technically end up being 381 with the 4 cards on sale from milk outside a bag of milk outside a bag of milk I've added, but that didn't feel like a fair framing for the video because it's actually just 377. It's a minor nitpick to add to the bunch, but yeah, it ended up being slightly more because of the 4 from the end. And funny enough, if those 4 sell, that'll be almost enough to buy milk inside a bag of milk inside a bag of milk again. So maybe I'll, I don't know, buy that for a viewer. I don't know, let me know if you haven't played it and maybe I'll gift you it or something. Either way, do let me know what you'd spend your money on, if there's any games under or just over £2 that I should be looking into, and maybe that's where the next fund will go. If you did like, all the interaction things are always good. I'm close to 700 subscribers now, which is lovely, and I'm kind of surprised and very joyed that people seem to be sticking around. I hope you do too. Thanks for watching.